If I take you through the actual balanced scorecard now, and then you can start to see where we're going. The business organisation, so what you're seeing on the screen there, what we've decided to do is, instead of employing additional trainers, because the money's not flowing enough to do that, we've already got about 40 staff, so 10 of those staff are being trained. We've trained 4 more already, and more will be trained so that we embed it more into what we're actually doing. Some of you will be aware of the government's Future Jobs Fund contract. Although that ends with the last placements in March, again we have a contract from our county council, and we are delivering Future Jobs Fund, to all of our Future Jobs Fund young people who we've been able to place in small community organisations across the county and slightly further afield. Every one of them will do Possibility Place, and the county council have been happy to pay for us to do that as well this year. So that's great. So that incorporation into existing contracts is already underway. The franchising model, as I spoke about before, that's a model whereby we've essentially developed the workbooks, a facilitator training course, and we've sold that now to Gen 2, who are the old Sunderland Housing Corporation, a very big housing provider. We've also got a number of other organisations, a commercial building company where we did some work with their chief executive delivering similar parts of Possibility Place in our local prison, and she was with us and she wants to buy it for us to deliver to all her staff. So quite exciting in terms of not just working with perhaps public sector organisations or as part of contracts, but actually on a model that's going to be working with companies as well. The next bit, the purpose-built Possibility Place, is a big vision which Hugh knows I've been working on for quite a number of years, of an old school in Easington Colliery, so some massive work still to do with that. So not quite there yet in terms of having our centre, but as I say, I've still got another couple of years to get to that. Perhaps it would be worth if we can go on to the learning and development section. The green that's up in the top corner. So what we've tried to do is make sure that, and I think this is an important point for big society, that what we have is evidence-based. So it's really important that you can actually demonstrate what you're doing. So everything that is part of the course is founded on proper psychological research, and if you're interested in this field of work, it goes right back to a guy called Martin Seligman, who's a professor of positive psychology in Pennsylvania, and he was actually doing some work with schools across in our part of the region in South Tyneside, and he was talking at a conference about how if people are caught in their own barriers to moving forward, they're really almost in a little box bounded by their own self-restraint. And so what we've actually done is he then talked about if you release that those barriers to people going forward, all of the extra possibilities for them, space and opportunities, is a real possibility place. So I wrote that down at the session and immediately had it as a company name. So we have a dormant company which we're not using yet, but it is there as a company, and we've trademarked the actual name and the logo. So we've really tried to make sure that it's ours, and you can actually see where we've gone in terms of oh, sorry, this looks a bit I think we've got part of an old balanced scorecard there, but essentially what we've been able to do is go forward with all of the evaluations, and every individual that takes part in a course does a questionnaire at the beginning and another at the end, which is shows us the distance travelled for that individual, and that's been interesting for a number of the big providers, saying, oh, you really can evidence that somebody's moved forward. So we think that that will build hopefully into some of the things like the work programme as well. What we've also done, which isn't on this because it only happened this week, was somebody's been piloting, a partner we've worked with in the past, an online method for capturing people's distance travelled, and possibility-based questions can fit into that. So we're working with them, and they're going to let us pilot it for free. So that's quite exciting in terms of what will enable us to build up an even stronger evidence base. And I think that, again, as I say, I think that's important. Some of you may be aware of social impact bonds, some of the work that's going on, the pilot happening at Peterborough Prison at the moment with St Giles Trust, but where we may well be able to encourage people to pay up front for us to do something, or put some money up front, providing we can evidence that the work we do will make a difference and save in cost to society in the long run. So that's some of the work that we're actually trying to do in terms of that. If I drop us down to the social profit area, yeah, all right, I think to back to the 2010, 2012, good. So what you'll see is we've delivered courses to quite a lot of people. The groups are people with mild mental health problems. The Fells is a direct access hostel run by the Cyrenians, who are a big homeless charity in our area. Waddington Street works with people with mental health issues. Centrepoint, obviously, with homeless clients. We've delivered in prisons. We've delivered to long-term unemployed. Our first contract, or proper contract, was with our housing solutions in County Durham. So everyone presenting as homeless in the county has had the course delivered with them. So you can kind of see the range of people that we're working with, and it really has made a difference in terms of each of their progress. So for me, the strength of something that every individual starts to feel better about themselves almost as soon as they do it. And the courses are short. We're talking of sort of 3 2-hour sessions as the shortest course we do, each a week apart, but even they make quite a difference. And then we've got slightly longer courses and courses designed for younger age groups, or for perhaps parents of children and things of that sort. So we've been able to develop quite a range of that. If I move across now to the financial bit, not making lots of money yet, but you can kind of see where that's beginning to go. We were winners of the Spark Challenge, which is a communities and local government funded program for charities working with homeless people, which is now being run again 2010. There were 15 finalists, I think, again this year. We won in 2008, and the £50,000 was fantastic, because what that did is enabled us to employ essentially 2 people full-time for a period to be able to do the development work. And I think for me, one of the things that we don't always have time to do is spend energy, time and a bit of resource on really developing something professionally. This isn't particularly about Possibility Place, but what that's done for us is given us a real model that we hope to develop more and more, of how you come up with what a social issue might be, develop a business model to tackle it, so true social enterprise, but then look at what we're calling a stage gate system of developing the people, the finance, the idea, and then also the kind of if you like, the platform on which to build it as a business. So we formed a Community Interest Company Limited by shares, Social Enterprise Acumen CIC, and that will become our research and development hub to enable us to develop more things like this, but take them all through a really focused channel, I suppose, with the right sort of support to get them out as much more viable businesses. Because one of the mistakes we've certainly made in the past is trying to do something far too quickly without quite enough resource to get it off the ground and away. And although we've managed okay, it puts a bit of strain on everything else we're doing. So we're working hard to make sure that we get it much more focused in the future. So from Possibility Place points of view, we've had a renewal of our contract with the Housing Solutions people despite less money, and as you can see, it's going to be not necessarily discrete money coming in for Possibility Place, but being embedded in what will be for us probably about £1 million a year contract for adult community learning. What was embedded in a £1.3 million contract for Future Jobs Fund means that essentially internally into the Possibility marketplace cost centre is quite a substantial amount of money. It will probably work out at around about 150,000 this year, which starts to show it, albeit still as a cost centre within the main business, as a very profitable cost centre going forward. I think I've probably gone round everything there. There's lots more to say, but happy to take questions.
Thanks, Kate. Let's take a couple of questions, and then what we're going to do is go into the breakout rooms, I think, unless Hugh's got an alternative approach. Sarah, let's start with you.
Okay. I just wondered, what is the actual sort of structure of the courses? You sort of say that it's all about personal development and that kind of subject area, but have you got a bit more information about what you actually deliver in the courses? And also about like the kind of the course sizes as well.
Yes, I talked about, if I take our short courses, so that's 3 courses, just 3 sessions, 2 hours apart. What we do is we normally run with a group of 10, maximum 12, do them in a community setting wherever possible. So it's about being where people are, and essentially the course is every individual makes up, if you like, their own workbook, which becomes their portfolio for the Open College Network accreditation, but can be done by people who don't read and write well, so lots of pictures and drawing. And it's very much fun, interactive activities. So, for example, the sort of content is about, we start with people's strengths. So you may have come across similar things. There's something called Goals UK, which is now quite an expensive opportunity for people perhaps particularly working in employability. I believe the license for that's about 30,000, ours is a lot less. And also Pacific Institute's Investment in Excellence. So we're not unique, but what we are is very grounded. But for us, we do a strengths questionnaire, so it's a bit like a magazine quiz for people so that they can start to evaluate what their strengths are, what their perfect day might be. We look at goal setting, affirmations, we look at the luck factor. Are you a lucky person? So do you take the right actions to make you lucky? The emotional resilience element of it is about bounce back, how you deal with adversity. So we're teaching techniques for actually doing that. But the whole thing is set out to be fun. So, for example, savouring the moment would be giving everybody a sweet and enjoying sucking the sweet and actually savouring it while it was happening. Goal setting, if you look at the floor while you're walking, we roll out a bandage. While you're walking along the bandage, you probably fall off it, but if you focus on a point on the wall ahead, i.e. goal, you'll walk much more effectively across the bandage. So it's that sort of thing, just to make it fun and interactive.
Any other questions to Kate before we break into the rooms and have more detailed conversation about this one?
Hi Kate, it's Sandy. I'd just like to comment on film. I actually quite like the format of that.
Yeah, the format, just to kind of explain, it's 2 members of staff. It was we have our own small little IT company, so Paul is quite good at doing the filming and then did the technical bits of whirling the logo around and things of that sort. So don't ask me how he did it, but he did, and then provided the voiceover at the end as well. So it was literally, it really was just done with a little handheld camcorder, and then I do have somebody who's got a bit of technical wizardry who's been able to kind of front and back end it and do a little bit of editing for us, but quite simply done.
Hi Kate, it's Jez. Thanks very much, very interesting. You stressed about evidence, things being evidence-based. Could you say a little bit more about, you mentioned questionnaires before and after. Could you say a little bit more about the types of things you're actually measuring, and I guess how you quantify the improvements that are clearly being made?
Hi Jez and others. I might get this slightly wrong because I'm not the technical person in all this, but there is something called the Edinburgh Warwick, I think it's the mental well-being score, and we talked to, there's an organisation called the Centre for Confidence and Wellbeing up in Glasgow. We went up to see them. Again, it was lovely having a bit of start-up money that let us say, oh, we can afford for somebody to go up for a day to Glasgow and see. And it's an international set of questions on things like self-efficacy, emotional resilience, and self-esteem. So what we were able to do is take an internationally recognised questionnaire and use that ourselves. And as I say, we're now going to build that in as a kind of an online scoring system. So the individual, because it is all self-assessment, simply at the beginning marks themselves on a scale between 1 and 10 on each area, and we do 4 different areas. And then at the end of the course, they mark themselves again on the same areas. And what we show is that on average, people move up at least 2 points in each area, and some of them substantially more than that. And on the longer courses, it's slightly more. So what we're able to show is a start and an end point from the courses, as I say, on a self-assessment basis, but at least it's that. And then what we've also started to do, but I'm not as far with that, is kind of run something of a control group. So we have, for example, we deliver some employability and skills training under an ESF co-finance contract, and so those individuals do literacy, numeracy and the ASDAN Employability Award. So some of them have done Possibility Place and some haven't. So what we're trying to track now is to see whether if they do Possibility Place at the beginning, does that actually, as I say, achieve much better retention on the course and higher achievement rates, and potentially as we move people into our employment programs, will it help with sustained employment in the long run? So that's a much longer term thing to do, but what we're able to do is pick out which of our clients have done Possibility Place now, which haven't, and so we can do some comparators.
Hi, Kate. I think you've answered my question. I was going to ask you about the distance travel evaluation, but I think you've just answered that question. Thank you.
Hi, Kate. Great as always. Just a couple of things for me. About this people being trapped in a box. There's a piece of Joseph Rowntree Foundation research written mainly by Ed Cox, who used to be a special advisor to Hazel Blears, called Rebalancing Local Economies, Widening Economic Opportunities for People in Deprived Communities. And they have this, they've studied 10 neighbourhoods across the north, in Liverpool and Yorkshire and the northeast, and really drilled down to neighbourhood level and looked at the various offers across the piece, sort of entry to employment offers. And one of the things that they've come up with is the idea that community outlook is really important, and that's this sense of exactly as your intervention is called, you know, what is possible, and reluctance of people to travel for jobs. We've had IDS talking about people getting on the bus and that kind of thing, but real barriers to psychological barriers to movement and what is possible for various people. I also read recently about a scheme in Wythenshawe in Manchester that simply had a travel consultant who was researching what buses people would need to take in order to get to different jobs, and that was proving to be one of the barriers. People didn't know the buses, or they didn't know the times of the buses, and so details. And so all for me, building into this word that you used when you said it was critical to getting into the county council scheme, that your organisation had a reach that other organisations just don't have. And when you were describing the client groups that you work with, it's evident that you're picking up not, the low-hanging fruit in terms of this, but some of the really difficult cases, which are the ones that lead to major societal saving in terms of other costs. This is the cost of doing nothing, which I think is going to become increasingly important as we see rising unemployment. The idea that there are a whole load of people who are just left on the margins of the global economy, but are nonetheless very expensive to the state, I think is going to become increasingly important. And interesting to see the condems talking about, beginning to talk about well-being and happiness as indicators up there. So I thought that was all very interesting. Just my question finally, would you like to say a little bit more, Kate, before we go into breakout, about the overall Acumen operation? Because it does seem to me that it's partly because you have a strong organisational base that you were able to invest some organisational time, and we've shared a few platforms with IPVR now, Institute for Public Policy Research, where he is in terms of a whole set of things. So I'm actually at an event of theirs later on this week. So rebalancing local economies, I think, is very, very interesting, and the aspiration thing is fascinating. We found something else I might refer people to is if you look at Blooming Marvellous or Acumen on YouTube, you'll find our little DVD of the Blooming Marvellous event we ran a few years ago, which transformed the way our community here in East Durham, Hordern, was thinking about themselves, really, and has really helped us do things like keep more shops open, get more businesses started, and a whole range of other really quite big economic factors in terms of at least keeping our head afloat during what's been a difficult time of recession. To come to the bigger Acumen, Acumen's bit of background was I founded Acumen 7 years ago, 2003, and my background had been running a family business of a garden centre, so you get a bit of a gardening theme comes through, but also very much about training and employability. And my job prior to starting Acumen was actually running an action team for jobs, initially for a training and enterprise council where I worked, and then into Job Centre Plus. So I was running 3 job centres and an action team as I started Acumen. Frustrated I couldn't make it happen within the public sector, so I thought the better way to do it was to work with the local people here to actually get something started on the ground as opposed to kind of doing it through authority. So that whole thing of reach came from very much wanting to be embedded in the community, working with the community, but to actually find ways to support people to start the journey where they were, but to be able to move on, because we would never be able to bring enough jobs into this area to actually recreate what was lost when the mines went, even though that's something I'm asked to do quite regularly. If I only brought the pit back last, you'd be our reat, it comes up quite often. That's not the reality, but if we can get people a first job and then move them on further afield, then that works pretty well for a lot of people here. What we do as a business, our main core business is delivery of contracts for employability and skills. So that's probably somewhere around about 2.5 million turnover for us, which is quite substantial. What it's also been is really difficult, as I explained before. So we've had 2 years of losses, very difficult times. All the reserves we had went, but it's coming full circle now. The work programme will be a key thing for us, because although we normally don't work with what I would call mandated clients, people who are actively seeking work as job seekers, allowance claimants, we tend to work with those who are outside that. Because of the welfare reforms, that will bring far more people into that group. So we're being sought out, and this is a very pleasant experience to be sought out
by all of the prime providers, so the Sercos, PricewaterhouseCoopers, 4-Star, G4S and those others, to say we want you in our, part of our plan delivering in your area, which is fantastic. And even A4E and Working Links coming full circle and saying, well, actually, you can bring something we don't do. So our core business of that sort of work, I think, is really coming back round again. Future Jobs Fund's been very helpful and would tide us through to the new programmes next year. The other things we do have really spun out of that because of seeing particular needs in the community and sometimes being offered an opportunity. So we have a cafe in the park in Hordon, which was the parish council saying to us, we want somebody who could run this as a social enterprise, will you do it? So we have it as a rent-free building. It's been a bit of a struggle at times, particularly over winter, but we've kept that going 5 years now, and it runs at a break-even essentially, not a profit particularly, but it can make some profit during the summer, which ties us through the winter period, which isn't so bad. A small IT company which was spun off but is self-sufficient, that's been going 3 years now. And the horticulture side, which started very small with Blooming Marvellous, but again, fairly mad at times we are here, but I took on took an opportunity last year around about July, August, and we've been taken on a 10-acre site with 2.5 acres of glass houses down in Hartlepool, about 14 miles south of us, which is now a big horticultural social enterprise. So that's growing around about this year. We hope to sell £400,000 worth of bedding plants to garden centres and potentially also to local authorities who do a little bit of that and want to do more. But that's already been a platform for us to pick up a bit of national work. So we're working for the National Offender Management Service, helping horticultural, what are essentially prison industries in horticulture become more enterprising in prisons. And we've just heard that we've won one of the 5 pilots for the Community Payback Programme, so a partnership with Durham Tees Valley Probation Trust to take their community payback in horticulture grounds maintenance, where we do a bit of landscaping, and make that into more of an enterprise too. So I think what you were saying before, Hugh, about having a platform is becoming more and more the case. So I've got a good back office. We've just appointed an interim corporate resources director, so somebody that's it's actually wonderful for us, somebody who's been made redundant by the Regional Development Agency, but who has done all the back office for a business link and then managed the RDF programme for the region. So absolutely spot on, very brilliant, and not somebody I would have been able to probably attract as a member of staff. So some of the fallout from the public sector cuts is actually helping us as well. So I think you can see it's quite exciting at the moment. We're not out of the cash flow woods and things of that yet, but getting there, and hopefully should be on a very even keel by around about February, March next year, with a good platform to build on and be ready for all the things that are starting to really flow from probably here about summertime next year.
Okay, I think we should move into the breakout rooms. We'll have about 20 minutes in smaller groups to discuss Kate's presentation and the sort of strategic planning and investment readiness questions around Possibility Place. So there'll be a timer. Yao's going to move us into the rooms, and then there'll be a timer in the room. So you'll see how much time you've got left. And at the end of the timer, we'll bring you all back together. It is a fairly abrupt process, which means that it kind of, you get brought back all at once. No loitering in the corridors as there would be in a real physical space. So let's see how we get on with that. I think we'll start moving, Yao, if you can do that. Thanks. Okay, everyone. I did say it's fairly brutal, the bringing us back to the room. We've now moved 2 breakout rooms, and now we've welcomed you back. So let's have some feedback to the group. Hugh, I'm going to try and put our notes. I've copied our notes. I'll try and put them up on this screen. But in the meantime, I don't know if you've got any notes or if you want to do some feedback from your group.
no notes. As you remember, Jess, I'm a non-able bloke who can't multitask. Indeed, I can barely type, so I'm sorry there are no notes from us. I guess the main focus of our conversation was around how do we capture social return, and there was some comment from Kate about that. Although some of the outcomes of Possibility Place are fairly easy to measure, some of the early distance travelled stuff doesn't necessarily lend itself to formal social impact, social return measurement. And I think that was the main topic of conversation. We did also have some conversation about working with prime contractors and the delivery risks that are going to stem from that. And clearly, people with a delivery track record who really know their business are going to be at a premium in this new risk environment where you need to be confident in your abilities if you're going to go for payment by results. I do think that we're going to need to see the detail of, particularly in the Welfare to Work program, of how that plays out, because clearly the equation of whatever it's going to be, 1.5 million people potentially working through these programs and only 500,000 jobs available, is going to make for some very interesting negotiation. I guess that will be mainly led by the prime contractors, and I think we have seen in the past things like Flexible New Deal, where essentially was still supposed to be outcome-based payments, but actually the prime contractors managed to negotiate away some of those very firm outcomes. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how the new government deals with outcome-based payments given the external environment. I hope I've captured some of that. Kate, please come in.
Thanks, Hugh. I think I just wanted to say something about that bit you were talking about in terms of work programme. The external environment has changed enormously. The work programme, I think, if you're an organisation that's involved in this arena, brings a lot of opportunities that weren't there in the last couple of years, unless you were kind of very fortunate with things like area-based grant, working neighbourhood fund or whatever. But it will be risky. I share your concerns about the fact that there won't actually be enough jobs on the demand side. And so what we're doing, and already being I think getting a lot of interest from the prime contractors, is talking about how we do more to create social enterprise or social firms to create employment opportunities, or potentially transitional employment opportunities for people furthest from the labour market. And also, and this is for me where there's a lot of opportunities for our Possibility Place activity, also about self-employment and the kind of doubts that people have about, well, will I ever be able to do it, start to be addressed with some of this kind of, the positive psychology tools as part of the ongoing business support. Lots of the ways we work with people, and we do business coaching, consist of us saying, yes, you can. We'll give you the right support and all the rest of it, but fulfill your dreams. You can actually do it, and we will create quite a lot of job opportunities, as we always have done, but through that sort of route as well.
Sorry, just one extra comment from me, and I can't remember whether it was in the breakout or not, but congratulations on securing your, I can't remember what title you gave them, but your person from the RDA. It does seem to me that there's a real opportunity to recycle former public sector workers, whether it's at regional level from the RDA and the government offices, but also more generally, we know that there are going to be serious cuts in local authority workers too. Here in Bradford, Action for Business Limited, my managed workspace development trust, we already have a self-employment, hot desking, catalyst room set up for people who are looking for business support around finding a new direction for them. And we're thinking quite seriously of pitching that to the public sector and designing it as a place where former public sector workers can reinvent themselves in a supported way. And clearly, if they come through our organisation, then we will be looking to take our pick of the best ones. You know, these are silver linings in difficult circumstances, but it does seem to me that there's possibility around both helping former public sector workers reinvent themselves and also a way of bringing talent into the third sector.
Okay, I'll just feedback a couple of points from our group. We talked a little bit about the film and were very much admiring the way it showed the human side of what the Possibility Place achieves, but felt that felt that that was put in a wider context through the balanced scorecard to understand the other kinds of returns as well. A bit strange that the film had some kind of perhaps inaccessible language around surplus reinvestment and so on towards the end. So it felt like it was for a very confused audience, or two different audiences possibly. We're looking at the development costs, cost of entry and so on, not necessarily a high cost of entry in terms of capital requirement, but certainly you know, I think Kate's point about taking time to develop the product well is obviously important. It does take time. It's important to have Acumen as a base to support it. A lot of concern about other competitors potentially coming in, taking the contracts, taking the intellectual property, but feeling that this essential ingredient was this really strong connection with the local community. And the fact that it was possible to measure as well. Sorry, Hugh, you're looking confused. I'm going to put the mic down. Why are you looking confused? Hugh is still looking confused, but that may have more to do with his headset than mine. Can everybody else hear me? Can I have some green ticks, please, if you can hear me? Good. Okay. That's a shame, Hugh. All right, I'll carry on. I'll just finish this off. So the one thing that we were interested in finding out what's going on with, Kate, was this premises, the fixed location. Because when we started thinking about that, thinking about a centre of excellence, sounds great. But actually, surely Possibility Place needs to be delivered very locally. So we were, and how will you sustain the cost of a centre of excellence, a building? So it'd be really good to hear from you about that. I'll put the mic down. Let's hear the answer to that one.
Hi, Jess, and that breakout room. The building has been an ongoing project to try to buy and refurbish this school, which is in private ownership. But that we wanted to call it Possibility Place because that expressed everything we're trying to do, and it's actually in Easington Colliery where Billy Elliot was filmed, one of the most deprived places in the country. So somewhere that just the right name helps. What we envisage there is that the Centre for Excellence in this field of working in sort of positive psychology would be the equivalent of the Centre for Confidence and Wellbeing, only even more community grounded, I think, that Glasgow has. So somewhere where people involved in this area of work could meet. You could have keynote sessions, bring in expert speakers from away. You would train your facilitators there, but we always envisaged by far the greatest majority of the training and delivery of the courses actually going out and happening where it still does, in communities or in prisons or in the direct access hostel, the foyer, wherever it might be. So all that really does is give us just a place to focus and develop the expertise as opposed to anything else. In terms of sustainability, this is a 52,500 square foot, 2 buildings, massive site. It would become a location for all sorts of other things where we would have office space, etc. So Possibility Place would not have to sustain it on its own by any stretch of the imagination, but potentially maybe almost a semi-virtual centre for that, in that we would obviously have kind of training rooms and things of that sort where this sort of activities and events could go on. We just like the name Possibility Place as expressing both a geographical place as well as where your head can go in terms of the possibilities.
That's great. I think that really captures it and explains it much better. It sounds really exciting. Just a couple more points then. The social return. I asked people whether they felt that this scale approach of distance travelled was more or less compelling than the social return on investment financial ratio of approach, the pound signs quantified approach. Most felt it depends on the audience, but what was really interesting was the way people felt, of course, that case studies and the human story is also crucial and sometimes the most important approach to social impact. But what was interesting about Possibility Place was the way you could intertwine all those three, so you could tell the stories very powerfully. You could then say, on average, people that come through this process travel 2 points or however many points along the scale, and the impact can be quantified financially as well. So a very good mix of different approaches. And the last thing was just understanding the range of customers and the balance of customers, but really recognizing that you must spend so much time just keeping up. Even before the change of government, there was always changes to the public policy and public finance availability. And you mentioned supporting people, for example, and I believe supporting people is now going to be cancelled or changed in the way it's funded. So, just something around how we once thought the public sector was relatively stable source of income. It clearly isn't anymore, and that this field of work, perhaps more than any other, is so dependent on the both the high level ideology and the kind of pragmatic funding of programs. So when I'm saying range of customers, I'm not so much talking about the people you work with, but the people who pay for it, and the changes in the people who pay for it. Any comments, Kate, on those things?
Hi, Jess. Yeah, I think what's interesting when we're looking at the cuts, and people are immediately saying, oh, it's going to be hard working with the public sector. What's actually happening to us, because of the field in which we're working, is that we're seeing the public sector wanting better value for their money and invest to save, not in the sort of technical sense, but in that sort of model, are the things that they're interested in. So albeit it's changed mightily, there's not really less money for welfare to work services. It's happening in a different way, but the government are still prepared to pay for, albeit later, but prepared to pay for savings to future welfare costs. Reducing reoffending is the absolute prime route for Ministry of Justice. They're really desperate to save ongoing costs, and obviously there's all the stuff about, will there be short prison sentences, etc. So Possibility Place plays into all of those very well. What we're perfectly capable of doing, and this is where I spend a lot of my time reading, reviewing, picking up any intelligence I can, networking, being at events, getting out there and finding out, talking to people, and I would recommend that to anybody as much as you possibly can, is that you just pick up on what's actually happening. So you mentioned supporting people. Yes, it's been cut back in its budget. It's also moving into the area-based grants, so will not be ring-fenced anymore. But the local authority are still paying for people to be supported in accommodation, and they're wanting those people not just to be supported, but to be able to progress and develop. So those conversations are still happening. We don't deliver it ourselves, but organisations that do are saying, no, but we need our client service users, whatever they term them, to actually progress on into employment if at all possible. So can we talk to you, because we think Possibility Place will work with that. So I'm quite comfortable that what we're really seeing is just actually a wider range of opportunities in many ways than was previously there before. And I think what the current policy in terms of big society is doing is either, because it's a very, very big contract, i.e. the work programme, we're finding the big providers, because they're not people who are actually wanting to deliver on the ground, they're very comfortable that we use our own solutions and ways of working to deliver on the ground. And that's quite different to the medium size that were grabbing the contracts before, who were very prescriptive in the way that they were working. So that kind of bigger but actually more local delivery works perfectly for us. And that's really good for us to sort of play on in the future as we go forward.
That is great to hear, and I hope that there are organisations like yours all over the country that are able to respond in that way. If those big primes are going to take a more hands-off approach and just finance the work rather than interfere in it all, that would be great. Okay, look, we're going to take a break now. So the idea is to break through, first of all, to say thank you very, very much to Kate for coming along and sharing Possibility Place with us. And then to take a quarter of an hour break to come back to where Rick is going to present, I believe, on the Action 21 project. That is right, isn't it, Rick? Okay. And Paul, I had thought it was going to be you. I hope you've spoken with Vicky about that. Is that all sorted out?
Get my email, so I've stood aside. I think it's I might be pitching in one of the future sessions.
I definitely hope so. Okay. All right. Well, so 11:45, we'll see you back here. When you come back, give us a tick to show that you're back, and we'll start again. Thanks very much. Bye bye. Sandy and Sarah, if you're back, can you click tick the green tick and also click the little door so that you're back with us. So it's just Helen and Sandy. Okay, I think we should probably start, Rick, if you're ready to go. Hopefully the others will be with us any moment. So if you can give us your pitch. We've got your slides here. I'll just find them for you. We've got parts of the balanced scorecard for you. So if you want to just start talking and then let us know when you want us to move the slides around.
Okie dokie, thanks for that. Yeah, I've got to apologise that the whole balanced scorecard isn't up for everybody to see, but yeah, what I'll do is let's talk through the business model. So our base now is obviously as we are, and you can see soon March 2011, later March 2014. So what are we doing now at the moment? We our primary markets is selling via different outlets, furniture, electrical, bikes, online sales of donated second-hand goods. We also have a 3-year contract with the local district council, and we have an SLA grant with the county council, with the district council for services. So our primary business activities as a charity, we dare to divert goods from landfill. That's the main thing that we do, and the money that we generate from there goes into sustainability projects based around food, energy, and transport. Again, some of these are educational, but they all have a practical theme to them, all the projects that we do. So let's see what we want to be doing very, very shortly. So the primary markets are pretty much the same, except for we're going to diversify the sale of diverted goods. At the moment, we've got one major contract with the county council on one site, which is on a municipal waste household waste site, and we also have another warehouse of about 5,000 square foot that we sell things out of. So what we're wanting to do by March 2011 is look to diversify and have another warehouse over in Warwick, which is about 7-8 miles away from Leamington. And what we want to do is we want to increase the information and education on the sustainability projects that we're doing via the Sustainability Centre, and we're delivering that under the 3-year contract with the District Council out of Jefferson Gardens, which is an award-winning gardens within Leamington. So our business activities, again, pretty much the same sort of areas. We want to move into the reuse of wood and paint. We've got a lot of weight on us from the county council to start diverting those because they're high, bulky items, or a high cost item for the council to dispose of, things like paint. So yeah, that's why we're probably going to move into there. We also want to maintain our status as a community-focused environmental charity. We're probably the preferred supplier or the preferred choice from most people around here, so we want to really keep that going. And what we want to do is develop a plan for a reuse hub, which is currently there's lots of reuse charities, second-hand charity shops. You can name them all from Oxfam all the way through, but currently they don't have diversion from landfill as their primary aim. They're just ways of generating cash that they then give to the main charitable cause. So they don't have reuse at their heart. So what we're trying to do is create a hub where we can take in all of these goods and then become a wholesaler to these other shops that sell it, because obviously they don't have any interest in going out and collecting all the white goods, testing them, giving them guarantees and then selling them on. Whereas we could collect the white goods, test them, and then sell them via a wholesale market to them. So if we move on to 2014, like I say, we want to look at our primary markets being a wholesaler bulky items to other charity second-hand shops, while still maximising goods diverted from landfill. And we also want to become a showcase of reuse at the point of origin via the county councils or whoever your municipal operator is. So that basically means becoming an exemplar for doing more tip shops on site that have reuse as their heart rather than just a charity shop. And our business markets I want to split between 50%, 50-50, so end consumers within Warwick District Council, and 50% split as a wholesale market. And then that will allow us to carry on providing more opportunities in the other 3 key areas that we work in, like I say, food, energy and transport. So I don't know if we've got anything do we want to go into the next slide? Have we got any other slides available? No, that's it. So cool. I'll go through the organisational development. I'll try and give some background, and I'm sorry that I'm talking through like this and you've got nothing to look at. But I've broken it down into legal, people, buildings, and what quality tools we're looking at. So our legal status is we're a charity, we're company limited by guarantee, and our main trading, the reuse shops, is carried out as part of our charitable objectives. Staff, we have 13 staff, which equates to about 8 full-time equivalent, and 13 trustees. Buildings, I have 3 buildings. One's on a 10-year lease from the District Council, one's on a 4-year lease from the county council, and the other one's a 6-month rolling contract. As soon as he gets planning permission to bulldoze it, he will do, but realistically we think that's a couple of years away. And as for a quality tool, we're doing Picasso level 1, and that's just self-verified at the moment. If we then move on to soon, so again keeping to the same headings, legal, people, buildings, quality tool. Legal, no change. People, we want to increase the amount of staff that we've got to cope with the plans that we've got for the eco park and the additional information centres that we'll have, and also we'll probably increase the headcount just to absorb the additional work that we're doing within the reuse operations. Buildings stay the same, but it'll be the start of building an eco centre on what's known as the Ford Foundry site in Leamington. And again, quality tools still sticking with Picasso, but obviously enhancing and carrying on up to level 2. And then if we look at later, so just to remind everybody, that's March 2014. We'll have, again, no legal change. People, I want to try and have in by then professional developments for the staff and clear, we'll say, career planning. So that could be via MVQs, things like that. Also looking at joint partnership working within the district and the county to aid project delivery and to cope with changes in the service delivery, because if you imagine, we've already been instructed by the county council to start working as joint partnership across the other community organisations within the county. So that's like the community centres and people who deliver services on our behalf. They're like, well, you really need to start moving together. So that's what's driving that. Buildings will be again no change, but by then we should have the eco centre on the Ford Foundry site up and running. And the quality tool, by then I'm hoping to be part of the FRNE, which will have an external audit, and that's a major reuse network. Obviously, like I say, the Picasso should be fine by then. Get some external auditing done then. So if we move on to our financials, get these out of the way. Currently, because we've just become a charity, before then we used to be a social enterprise, the figures based upon now on an 18-month trade-in, and then in future. So we've just turned over 300,000 for the 18-month period. That splits out into about 70% from the reuse sales, 10% on contracts, 10% on donations, and about 10% on local authority grants and things like that. That's given us an operating surplus of about £12,000 and reserves of about £5,000, and it gives us some restricted monies for projects that we're delivering next year of about £7,000. So like I say, as soon, if we look at that, I want to reduce the percentage that comes from the Warwickshire County Council site. At the moment that's 70%. How we'll do that is we'll open up a new site. I still expect our revenues to be ticking over about £275,000 to £300,000, but again that's going to be on a 12-month period rather than an 18-month period. We'll have a growth in our surplus and our reserves, and we'll be looking for, during that period, capital funding for the eco park, and I would suspect the additional space that we've already said that we'll need for the extra rooms, that'll come via just our own cash flows, so we won't need funding for that, so I'm quite comfortable there. If we look at the financial return later, I'll be working on around about £350,000 at that period. We'll have surplus to cover our non-insurable risks of about £60,000, and we should have by then our eco park up and running. Although that won't be generating huge amounts, it should be covered out of our £350,000 revenues. Again, we've still got to look into more into how we'd pay back the loan, the capital, but some of that could come out of the surplus that we've got and that we've generated. So that's the financials. Now, if we go to the nice, pretty stuff, the fluffy stuff, the social returns, the stuff that gets quite exciting. Because we cover many different areas, I'll try and condense it down. And this is the difficult thing when it comes to putting it onto the balanced scorecard, as I'm sure everybody will agree. So let's just whiz through some aims. We know what the aims are. They're to divert goods from landfill, and they're also to provide education through practical projects on sustainability. So we have 150 active volunteers. This is in the now. We had 2,000 children days of educational events. We average 20 tons of goods diverted from landfill per month. We've installed 45 kilowatt hours of solar PV. We've brought online 52 allotment plots. We've got about 21 hours of free desk space to other community, social environmental organisations. So it could be the Warwickshire Wildlife Trust in this case, and Transition Towns. So that's in the here and now. By the soon, we'll have 5,000 visitors to the Sustainability Centre per year. We'll have diverting about 22 tonnes per month of goods from landfill. We'll have 250 active volunteers. We'll be doing about 150 kilowatt hours of solar energy installed. We'll have about 5,000 children impacted in different environmental school days, and we'll have the eco park. Again, I'm not putting any figures behind that because I don't think it'll be open at that point. It'll be just there. By the later, the goods that we'll be diverting from landfill will be about 350 tonnes per annum. Bearing in mind, probably 100 tonnes of that will be via wholesale, so not all directly attributed to us. Probably have 275 to 300 active volunteers, about 5,000 children days, 15,000 visitors to the Sustainability Centre, and about 1,000 friends of Leamington Eco Park up and running. And again, that'll be delivering educational information about sustainability. So that's my balanced scorecard in a nutshell. Yeah, any questions?
Hands up, please. Brilliant.
Hi Rick, it's Sandy. Just wondering if you'd used gift aid at all to help with finances.
Yes, we just started using gift aid for our we'll say the money that comes via the donations. What we find with gift aid in for furniture and we'll say donations where we've then got to resell them on, it's not complex, it's just difficult. We are doing it, and I'm not sure how much longer they'll carry on doing it, the government will carry on doing it for, but yeah, it's something that we do.
Hi Rick, it's Jez here. First I just want to say I think it's a really good pitch. I think it's the best balanced scorecard I've seen recently, so well done. Perhaps we could get a copy if that's possible. I'd be interested in seeing the whole thing. The other question I had really was just in terms of where you've come from. If we were looking at your balanced scorecard 2 years ago, for example, you know, how have things gone? Have they gone to plan, and what have been some of the issues you've had along the way?
Good question, because I've been with the company about 2 years now. So if we look 2 years ago, we had just one site at the Warwickshire County Council household recycling site. We had about £50,000 worth of reserves, but we weren't really delivering on our 3 other objectives, which, like I say, are food, transport and energy. So we made a plan to open a bicycle reuse shop. We now divert about 16 bikes per week, and that's all done by volunteers. We do training on cycle maintenance, and we do cycle proficiency, so that's come a long way. We also decided that we'd try and get some land just on the outskirts of Leamington and convert it into allotments. So that was, we managed to get 3 acres of cemetery expansion land, and we've converted that into allotments. I suppose the issue was that we had to spend some of our reserves to get the new building open to start building up our reserves. But so yeah, I think things have gone to plan. We have been around since 1996 as an organisation, incorporated in 2000. So we had, because we were doing this huge amount of change over the last couple of years, we have had a big change within the Board of Trustees. But yeah, that's been the only difficult thing, I would say.
Other questions or comments for Rick, or comments on the presentation?
Hi Rick, I was wondering how you estimated the 15,000 visitors to the Eco Centre, and whether you'd benchmark that against other centres that might be similar.
The 15,000 visitors to the Sustainability Centre, we're basing that on figures because we run the Ranger in Jefferson Gardens for the district council. We know that there's approximately 1.2 million visitors per year to the gardens. So we're looking at a very modest amount of people who visit the gardens to then entice them into the Sustainability Centre. And that's obviously one of the primary roles of the Ranger, is to get people to visit the Sustainability Centre. We have looked at other sustainability centres. There's one just down the road that's run by the world's largest radiator company. What's it called? Wolseley. And they, again, they're a profit-making organisation. Lovely thing to go and look at there. They're using it to showcase all of their great work that they do. But again, the important thing is for them is going footfall, and I think because we're in this award-winning garden in Leamington, we've got the footfall. So very, very modest aims for just getting 15,000 visitors during the year to come in and actively take something away from the Sustainability Centre.
All right, yes, David. Just intrigued about the wholesale of bulky items. Just wondering when you've done any research in the area. I mean, it's always something that interests me as well. But do you think you'll find other charity shops who will actually want to buy stuff from you? I mean, typically, you know, they tend to take donations and sell them rather than buy things in and sell them. So I'm just wondering how you think that might actually work in practice.
Currently, most charity shops, or you look at brown goods, so TVs, microwaves, things like that, there's a cost to have them pack tested. Most charity shops that you see on the high street don't have the room to test them. They can get the donations, but then what do they do with them? It just becomes waste, so generally they don't accept them. So the wholesaling model, which we had FRN to do a years-long study for us in Warwickshire, and they've come up with some huge amount of, you know, millions of tons of waste that's applicable for this type of wholesaling, where you utilise the small charity shops to accept the donations. You then have a network where it's brought back into a central site and it's tested, it's made safe, some of it would be sent to landfill or stripped down for recycling, but then the rest of it would be sold on a wholesale basis out. So yeah, FRN, I love the model. There was recently, I think, £10 million just awarded to London by the FRN and the government to do a very, very similar sort of model there. Warwickshire's just on the outskirts of, well, it's not far from Birmingham, which is the UK's second largest city, or England's second largest city, I don't know which. So that they're really pushing for that. So yeah, the business case stacks up. The model looks quite exciting, really, because, like I say, the charity shops want to do this. They want to increase their ranges of household goods that they can sell, but they don't want to go to the expense of having bike trainees on board or electrical testers on board. So yeah.
Hi Rick, Sarah here on Sandy's mic. I'm intrigued about this. You're going to pick up a load of white goods, which you obviously already get from before it goes to landfill. And then you're going to take these white goods and you're going to pack test them. And if they pack test them, then fair enough. But if they don't pass the pack test, then do you have people on board who can then, look into mechanics making them work again and then sell them? And if so, how is that going to work out financially?
We're basing it on the model that we have with our bikes at the moment. If you look at our bikes, the ones that we can't fix at all, they're just beyond repair, bent frames, things like that. There's scrap value in either the aluminium or the steel itself. And there's always people who are willing to collect, but for very minimal fees, i.e. we won't make a lot of money on it, but there's always people willing to take the scrap or to do more recycling, which is not what we do. We do the reuse, so they would go away and strip it down into the basic component parts. And that's the same with, if you look at TVs at the moment, we take TVs in, we pack test them, we function test them. Those that don't work, or we think that there's no life in them, or they don't accept a digibox or something like that, we've got contracts where we can supply them to people who then recycle them and strip them down. And again, you don't make huge amounts of money, but as long as we've got a waste carrier's license and we're covering the transportation costs, which once you start doing it in bulk, you can cover the transportation costs. So yeah.
More questions for Rick, or shall I have a go at an overview? I think the silence betokens that maybe I should have a go at an overview. Rick, well done. Very good, and I thought your responses to the questions brought out a lot of things. So in general, real encouragement, but I guess my job is to try and also illustrate some areas that I think you could strengthen this. Clearly, not assisted completely by our inability to post the whole balanced scorecard up for you. But I do think at the beginning it is worth pausing and establishing your own credentials. So it's Action 21, where is it based? It wasn't until later in the conversation that your extensive track record as an organization emerged, and I didn't get any feeling for your skills and abilities, which are obviously, as you talked about it, I got a really good impression that you knew what you were talking about. But in the initial pitch, I felt that there were some of these phrases that I would call a hostage to fortune. It left me wanting to know more at the time, and I think a good pitch always closes off those avenues and is a piece in itself. So I would have liked to hear a bit more in terms of establishing your credibility before you launched into the presentation of the business model. I get, obviously, landfill diversion as being the primary purpose for that. I think that that leads to solid contracts with the local authorities who, as I understand it, are fined if they don't hit reducing targets, and the price per tonne per landfill is European regulated and goes up and up. I think that there's something here that you can begin to link to the quality of your future income stream. Obviously, everyone at the moment is very concerned about public sector contracts, and I think that if you can make the link in people's mind between, you know, the regulation around landfill, then that goes towards, you know, the security and quality of the income stream that you're obviously relying on in the future. For instance, hostage for fortune statements, you talked about having 3 warehouses and new warehouses. You talked about having them. As an investor, immediately I want to know, on what terms do you have them? Do you own them? Are they leases? And again, that was something that got picked up later in the conversation. But it's just to be careful about how you present that at the moment. You then introduced the whole notion of white goods, and I wasn't sure how much of that you were doing already, and there began to be some technical jargon around waste carriers licenses, PAT testing, and that kind of thing. Again, in the conversation, I got the impression that, you know, you were really on top of these kind of things. But if you are pitching to financial investors, they won't necessarily be expert in those kind of things. And so establishing your technical and skill competence, again, I think is important. So when you mentioned your staff numbers and your trustee numbers, we just had numbers rather than any information about skill levels and that kind of thing. Clearly, skill level and experience in this field, just as it is, as we heard around the Possibility Place example, is one of the costs of entry to this marketplace. And so your credibility is enhanced by saying, we already have those skills. You mentioned that surpluses were recycled into sustainability projects, and again, it wasn't until later that I got a feel for what those were, the bike recycling, the cycle proficiency. I'm not sure how you characterize the allotments project, and again, I guess wherever there's land involved, on what terms do you hold that land and that kind of thing. The figures are great. I worry about your lack of reserves, and when you then go on to talk about the building-based project and the eco park, I know it's early doors, but I guess I want to know that this is clearly it's going to be a big step forward for you, but is it in some sense a manageable step, and therefore some finance information around you know, the size of that next step, and some early thinking around how you're going to attract the capital funding for that. Particularly, I suppose, I would always focus on where are you going to get the risk funding. So if this is going to be partly financed through debt finance, that bit we know, it depends on your surpluses generated, how much debt you can afford. But there's always going to be the down payment element, and I wondered if you'd given any thought to that. What popped into my mind was, is this a community share issue? Moving on to your social returns, and clearly you've already got an impressive volunteer base, you're linked into schools, you know, thousands of children days. So is this something that actually there is a community of interest here that you could use to raise some risk capital to provide the deposit, if you like, to go alongside your mortgage to develop the building? I thought the social return was nicely expressed, but is it worth trying to monetize some of those things, particularly clearly the tons per month diverted, I think fairly easily are monetarized, and so I would encourage you to do some of that. I don't know then in terms of, there were some things I didn't understand, like impressive and interesting, you know, your PV installation work, but quite how does that fit into the business model? I wasn't quite sure. Again, is there something around CO2 savings? When you talk about your allotments, who is using the allotments? How well are they used? Are there numbers that you can attach to that? Are there therapeutic values that you can attach to that? We all need to talk about happiness these days. So those are things that I think are worth developing. Now, I'm being really mean here, of course, because you had only a very limited amount of time to present all this stuff. And I'm sure that had you had more time, you would have presented on those things. But those, I guess, were my initial reactions to it. And let me leave you on a better note, perhaps, than the one I've been striking. Rick, this sounds like a really interesting business. You come across as having real credibility in understanding the business with some interesting forward aspirations. And as an investor, I would have to say I will be intrigued to talk to you further about how things might develop. Just one final comment, perhaps. Sorry, I've just remembered something in terms of criticism. I think that soon being March 2011 is very soon. There were some slides at the Good Deals conference yesterday that were put up by, I think, Jonathan Jenkins from Unlimited, who now have a fund to help social enterprises develop with risk finance. And he was talking about the number of inquiries they'd had over the year and was grouping them by when people wanted the money. And 60% of the people who wanted the money wanted it as soon as possible. And there was a groan that went around the room because as investors, that's the last thing that we like to see, that people for one reason or another desperately need money in a hurry, usually betokens a lack of strategic planning, a lack of forward planning, and that is worrying to an investor on the first basis. So I understand, you know, that things may change soon and therefore you wanted to capture that. But I would encourage you as a strategic plan always to try and push out your soon as far as you credibly can, particularly as it sounded to me as if actually, apart from the new warehouse, the business model was essentially already established and you were going to continue with the same business model for a while. Certainly your turnover projection in terms of increased turnover sounded to me as if roughly you were talking about a stable state for a while. And therefore pushing out your notion of soon and laying your financing plans early seems to me something that is good if you can possibly do that. So my reflections, I hope they're of some use. And I do want to stress, you know, this sounds like an intriguing business. I got a good sense of both your organizational and your personal credibility, and therefore, you know, all things being equal, an attractive proposition to work with you to look for external investment.
Thanks a lot for that feedback. Yeah, like you say, there's so much missing, and it's only when you go through it and speak it out loud that you realise what is missing. And yeah, it's hopefully I can start making more notes and add to it. So watch this space. So, but thank you for the feedback. Thank you.
Just to reiterate one point. I don't know if it's an English thing. I listen to Americans doing presentations, and they are incredibly good about talking about themselves. It seems to me us English, in general, are more bashful about saying, you know, I've been doing this for years, I really know what I'm talking about, here's my personal credibility. It is incredibly important. I sit in Community Builders panel, and once the pitch has happened and people have left the room, the immediate conversation amongst the panel is about the credibility of the leadership. And I know I said at the beginning of this course that we weren't going to talk a whole load about leadership. But establishing your personal credibility, I think, is really important. And I think, for instance, it's something that Kate Welsh is really good at. And so I would encourage you, don't be bashful, Rick. Establish your personal credibility alongside the organizational credibility right at the top of the pitch is really important.
Okay, everyone. Last couple of minutes, we always like to finish just by getting everybody to put their hands up again, like we did at the beginning, and just go around and say what you thought about the session, anything specific that really captured your imagination. If everyone can put their hands up, we'll just do that now. So we've got Sandy. Everyone else? Hands up. Fantastic. Okay, we'll start with you, Sandy. Thanks. Or Sarah.
Hi, yeah, I found that really interesting. We're trying to develop our social enterprise, and we're looking at different models and ways of increasing income. Our social enterprise is all income based. We don't get any funding towards it at the moment. We're making about 40 grand a year surplus to go into the rest of the charity. So some of the things, sorry, I've forgotten his name. Rick, yeah, said it's been really interesting to us. And again, I've really enjoyed the session, so thank you. Sarah?
Not going to get away with that one. She's put me in it again. I enjoyed the whole session. It was really great. Particularly Kate's business model, etc. So thanks for that, Kate. I know you've gone. And Rick, again, it was a learning curve for us. Obviously, from the criticism that constructive criticism that you received. Obviously, we've all learned from that about the introduction, selling ourselves, etc. So thanks for that, Rick.
Hi everyone, yeah, fantastic session. I feel quite buzzed really, with lots of inspiration. One of the sort of the main points I'd like to bring out is the feedback from the breakout sessions about self-employment. That's the area that I sort of do a lot of training on, and the project that I'm working on through an ESF funded project. It's all about sort of developing people's sort of awareness of going into self-employment as a way back into work, and bringing in sort of personal development and increasing people's confidence and their own sort of personal credibility as well. It goes into all of that. So I've sort of got a lot of things that I can now bring into my sessions that I'll be delivering over the next few weeks with my groups. But yeah, really good. All right, thanks.
Very useful and very interesting. It was interesting to see two pitches, which I guess are both looking towards the public sector for finance, and either directly or indirectly, although the second one was maybe less so. We're paddling our organisation like mad away from public money, so it's interesting to see some organisations that still have confidence in that source of income.
Temi, we couldn't hear you then. Do you want to have another go? I know. Yeah. Do you want to have another go? Sorry, Temi, I've had to take the microphone away from you there. Can we go through the others who've got their hands up, Jez and so on?
Yeah, hi, Jez here. I think Temi's died or a computer has anyway. Yeah, I enjoyed the session. I found it was really interesting. And the training, for me, I'm volunteering at Social Enterprise where we are looking at strategic planning for the next few years, and adult education is one of the things that's being doing some feasibility on. So it was interesting to hear a bit about the training and also longer term the reuse. So it's hopefully it could be relevant in this area as well. But I found it very interesting and good information all around. Really. Thank you.
I like the conversation that we had, especially in our breakout group, about the journey travelled and how you do social return monitoring. It's something that we're just doing or starting to do now. So yeah, I got quite interested into that. And yeah, thank you for the feedback, Hugh. There's a lot to cram in and think about, but all very valid points. So yeah, that was a nice experience. So thank you. Hopefully next time I do it, I'll have got over all of those issues that I had last time, and yeah, be even better. Thank you.
I'm sure you will, Rick. You know, I think practice is really important in this. One final comment from me on your thing. You did eventually introduce benchmarking. I do think evidence of benchmarking is really powerful in terms of presentation. I love this. I love thinking about different business models. It makes such an attractive change to the kind of sort of policy lobbying work that I get involved in. And so it's great. It feels to me like I'm coming home to talk about something really substantive that I really enjoy. So thanks very much, you all. I'm sorry I missed the first one of these. I will be with you for the rest of the course. Thanks again.